Shalom, salam, and hello to everyone who has joined us today from your respective countries and organizations. My name is Gabriella Saven. I'm the South African representative for JLink, the International Progressive Jewish Network. Before we begin, we want to explain the translation options for tonight. I'm going to explain them in English, and then our interpreters will explain them in French, Spanish, and Portuguese. If you want to listen to this event in English, either make no changes or select the English channel by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen of the computer or the top of your screen on mobile. I will now allow Marina to explain in French.
Bonjour, donc il y aura une traduction simultanée en français et vous devez cliquer sur un globe. Sorry, I don't see a globe. You said there's a globe and they need to click on.
Once we explain
okay.
languages, the globe will be available.
D'accord. Donc, une fois qu'ils vont expliquer la traduction dans les différentes langues, et à ce moment-là, il y aura un globe qui apparaîtra et vous devrez cliquer sur la langue que vous voulez. Vous voulez entendre donc, sur le français.
Merci.
Okay.
Tareq, if you could explain in Spanish, please.
Buenas tardes, buenos días. Va a haber interpretación simultánea a francés, portugués y español. Si quieren escuchar la interpretación en el español, ahora que aparecerá un globito terráqueo en su pantalla, escojan el canal de español y podrán escuchar la interpretación. Si quieren oír en el fondo el inglés, déjenlo tal como está, sino también van a tener la opción de poner mute para el idioma original.
Thank you. Ayala, if you could explain in Portuguese, please.
Boa tarde a todos. Haverá tradução simultânea ao português, espanhol e francês. Vocês verão na barra da sua tela um globo onde poderão fazer a opção pelo idioma que desejarem. Se quiserem deixar em inglês, podem também mutar a interpretação. Muito obrigada, bom evento.
Thank you. Just a reminder that if you want to listen to the webinar in English, you can either make no changes or you can select the English channel once the globe is available to you. I will now turn interpretation on and we should be good to go. JLink is an international progressive Jewish network carrying out advocacy efforts worldwide on behalf of dozens of Jewish diaspora organizations and individuals. Together with Israeli and Palestinian organizations and individuals, JLink cooperates in support of democracy and a peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. As an international progressive Jewish organization, we work with our respective local Jewish communities, our national governments and international organizations to advance policies that promote justice and human rights. Our organization is run by 6 delegates from 6 regions, namely Latin America, the United States, Canada, Europe, Israel, and South Africa. For more information on JLink, please visit our website, jlinknetwork.org. Now for today's program. Climate change is hitting the Middle East with soaring temperatures expected to put significant strain on already scarce water and agricultural resources. In turn, this threatens the national security and stability of the countries concerned. Several important initiatives are being implemented in Israel, Palestine, and the neighboring region to reduce emissions and bring water security. Advances in solar energy and water desalination are equally promising. Cooperating on climate change can be a concrete way to build trust and help achieve peaceful coexistence between Israel, Palestine, and their integration in the region. The running of the event will be as follows. Minister Tamar Zandberg, the Israeli Minister of Environmental Protection, will initiate the webinar with her opening remarks. Each panelist will then have 10 minutes to present, after which we'll have 1 round of questions and a Q&A session with our audience. Most importantly, we ask you to listen openly and engage respectfully. We'd like to thank our panelists and Minister Zandberg for being here today, and we hope you enjoy. Minister Zandberg, I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for holding this very important webinar. I'm very happy to take part. in this extremely important meeting. You know, in our region, perhaps more than any other area, the area of environmental protection makes clear the urgent needs for expanding cooperation between Israelis and Palestinians in particular, but actually, you know, regional and also global cooperation. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the land that we use, that they don't recognize the lines that we human beings draw on a map. We say very often that environment knows no borders, and I think that this is maybe the one area in which this is so very literally true. And this is particularly true for the changing climate. It will impact our health, our well-being, of all the people of the region, regardless of nationality or faith or you know, gender, age, etc. I'm very happy that the current Israeli government has decided for the first time in Israel's history to take climate change and in general environmental protection very, very seriously. And this is actually the first time, very late, but you know, better late than never. We have already, in the 8 months that this government exists, we took some very important decisions, among them the net zero emission goal by 2050. We passed a landmark decision on transition to low carbon economy, and we set new policies in areas from transportation and industry to clean energy and clean building. And this is all just the start. We are now formulating comprehensive climate legislation, also for the first time in Israel, something that is already very acceptable in many countries. We are formulating a new system of carbon pricing, which is proven to be the most effective means for reducing carbon emissions. And we are taking steps towards a circular economy in terms of waste that are also donating to methane emissions. However, I deeply believe that this is not enough just for Israel to change its strategic approach to climate action on its own. It must increase our cooperation with our immediate neighbors, and first and foremost, the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people. It is critical for Israel's national resilience. You know, we talk about resilience in terms of climate, but it is also true in other terms here in our region, for our regional stability, for promoting climate justice, for closing gaps in the ability of those who live in our region to enjoy our mutual natural resources, to deal with the challenges of our changing environment, and also, may I say, for peace, that forgotten word that we haven't given up on, even though the political challenges are great. Also within our government, you know, this is a very diverse and government politically, but I believe that climate and climate change and the changing environment around us is a very, very important tool to build bridges and to working together on mutual challenges. And that is why in the last summer, I had a very productive meeting with my Palestinian counterpart, the Palestinian Minister of Environment. That was the first meeting between Israeli and Palestinian ministers since 2014. Together, it was mitigated by my friend, the Minister of Regional Cooperation, Minister Isawi Frej. And we discussed, it was a very open and constructive conversation. And we decided on some mutual projects that we can work on together. We actually are expanding our cooperative dialogue on issues such as waste disposal, recycling, wastewater treatment, combating pollution, and restoring natural area and natural resources in our region that is extremely vulnerable to climate change in terms of heating and drying of our region. However, I believe that the potential for regional environmental cooperation is much broader than that. You probably heard of the recent Green-Blue Energy for Water agreement between Israel and Jordan with Emirati involvement. There are many possibilities for a win-win cooperation which address our strategic climate challenges, promoting economic prosperity, advancing a sustainable future for all of us. It is crucial that the Palestinians are integrated into such initiatives so that all can benefit from the new possibilities created by climate innovation and by the possibilities that climate change poses. Climate change is not only about the crisis and the disasters to come. It is also about opportunities that we can share as mankind, as countries, but also regionally. We can use this opportunity of the Abraham Accord and the new reality in the Middle East to open doors for large-scale climate cooperation. We are already discussing joint projects and joint ventures in order to build a healthy and sustainable future for all, to transform the Middle East into a global hub for climate solutions. In that respect, I can mention the COP27, the next big conference of heads of states that will take place in Sharm el-Sheikh in our region in Egypt in the end of this year, in November 2022. And we are already working on different levels to bring together all the partners from our region and globally to see how our region can be not only a source of conflict, but also a source of opportunity. So I want to thank J-Link and all the partner organizations for organizing this very timely event, and for all of you that advance and promote and dream and make peace here in our region and globally. Support a progressive, democratic, and sustainable future for Israelis, Palestinians, and for all the people of the region. And I wish you a successful and fruitful conference, and I look forward to working together with you on protecting the environment and creating an environment of peace to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Zandberg, for your address to us all. I'll now hand over to Gidon. Gidon, I just want to make sure that you are able to share your screen now.
Yes, I can. I'm putting it on now. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to present at this event this evening, at least Israel time. My name is Gidon Bromberg, and I'm the Israeli co-director of EcoPeace Middle East. EcoPeace, for those that are not aware, is quite a unique organization. We are an Israeli, Palestinian, Jordanian organization together. It's a single organization. I'm one of 3 co-directors in our office here in Tel Aviv. Nada Majdalani is our Palestinian director out of our office in Ramallah, and Yana Abu Talib, our Jordanian director out of our office in Amman. And we're about 70 staff, Palestinian, Jordanian, and Israeli together, working for a better future of both peace and sustainability for our troubled region. I'm going to present today the Green-Blue Deal, which really speaks to some of the very important words that Minister Zandberg just spoke about. The Green-Blue Deal is a report that EcoPeace launched, as you can see here, in December 2020, just over a year ago, with some very high-level officials from the world and also our region. And it's really inspired by, on the one hand, the European Green Deal, which is Europe's continental sort of effort to combat the climate crisis, and also the policies of the Biden administration in the United States. For lack of time, I'm not going to go into the challenges that the climate crisis presents. Minister Zandberg mentioned many of them, and I'm going to go straight into some of the solutions that at EcoPeace we've been advancing. And first and foremost, the water energy nexus that Minister Zandberg spoke of is very much the agreement signed between Israel, Jordan, and the UAE is very much based on the work of EcoPeace, and a study that EcoPeace completed back in 2015, highlighted in 2017, highlighting how we can turn the situation of crisis, both in declining precipitation because of rainfall and the challenges of meeting the climate commitments of reducing CO2 emissions from our various countries, to an opportunity to cooperate. And what our study highlighted was that Jordan has the comparative advantage of other countries in the region, particularly Israel and Palestine, of having vast desert areas to produce renewable energy, to harness the sun at scale and at prices that are truly competitive to the rest of the region. Israel has the Negev, but the Negev is mostly captured. Half the Negev is military training areas, the other half are declared nature reserves. And Israel is struggling to meet its commitment even of 30% renewables by 2030. And therefore, when we came, first of all, to who was then the Minister of Energy, Steinitz, during the earlier Netanyahu government, we received positive interest. But when this new coalition government was formed and a repair of relations with Jordan, the program really was able to move forward. And what has been signed now is the culmination of many years of work, as you can see, whereby Israel will start to purchase large-scale renewable energy from Jordan that will go west, and Israel will desalinate Mediterranean seawater and move that desalinated water east to the Sea of Galilee and then on to Jordan. And the reason why this is so attractive to Jordan is because the Mediterranean is 100 kilometers from all of the major population centers. It's 100 kilometers from the Mediterranean to Amman, or from the Mediterranean to Irbid, Jordan's second city, while it's 300 kilometers to Amman from the Red Sea, 400 kilometers to Irbid, Jordan's second city, which means that the cost of the water would be 2 or 3 times the cost of moving desalinated water. And it's on that basis that Israel and Jordan have moved forward for the very first time, creating what we're describing as healthy interdependencies, where each side has something to sell and each side has something to buy, and are able to meet climate targets and region-wide water security and energy security by applying this proposition forward. From the outset, Palestine has been involved in our plans and our drawing. There is a connection between Jordan and Jericho, and there's an upgrading of the amount of electricity that Jordan will sell to the Palestinian Authority. We're working to continue this program to fully include Palestinians in this water energy exchange, including working to allow investments, or to get Israeli approval for investments for solar energy in Area C, directly for Palestinian benefit. And the planning for how electricity and water will move is advancing, and I think we're certainly proud of where things stand today. Another important component to meet the climate challenge is to supply water and rehabilitate critical water resources. And a second aspect of the sale of water, these dark blue dots are the 5 large desalination plants on the Israeli coast. Israel is completing a 1 billion shekel investment program of reversing the national water carrier. The national water carrier is this pipeline that Ben Gurion built in the 50s and 60s that would move water out of the Sea of Galilee and bring it to the center of the country and down to the Negev for agriculture. Well, because of the climate crisis, the Sea of Galilee has experienced about 15 years of drought in the last 20 years. And in order to prevent the Sea of Galilee from becoming saline, Israel is now connecting all of these desalination plants and reversing the pumping. And this presents the opportunity to also move the water to Jordan and equally to the Palestinian side of the Jordan Valley in the future, to move the water through the national water carrier to the Sea of Galilee. And instead of what's currently the situation of a pipe that connects the Sea of Galilee, you see the small pipe here, with the King Abdullah Canal on the Jordanian side, we're working with our respective governments, including with Minister Zandberg and the Ministry of the Environment, to call for the cleanup of the River Jordan and to allow the fresh water that will be supplied first and foremost to Jordanians, but also in the future to Palestinians from the Jordan River, to be taken directly from the Jordan River. And that way we can rehabilitate the river that, for those that are not aware, the lower part of the Jordan River from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea is today little more than a sewage canal, with half the water having previously taken by Israel and the other half by Syria and Jordan. So this is another sort of concrete advance as to how we can rehabilitate critical biodiversity areas and bring back about 50% of the biodiversity lost since the demise of the Jordan River, but also create new economic opportunities related to a fast, clean flowing river, because agriculture will be on the decline in the Jordan Valley given the climate crisis, and we need to find new economic opportunities for the 600,000 Jordanians that live in the Jordan Valley. On their side, 60,000 Palestinians and around 15,000 Israelis. Thirdly, and very importantly, we see the possibility through the climate paradigm to move forward on new arrangements between Israelis and Palestinians in the water sector to advance Palestinian water rights, to advance water resilience for Israelis and Palestinians together. And this is based on the premise that what was relevant when Oslo was signed 27 years ago on water issues is no longer relevant today. Back in 94, 95, there was only natural water, and that was the coastal aquifer shared between Israel and Gaza, the mountain aquifer shared between Israel and the West Bank, and the Jordan River system. And sharing the water fairly was seen as a difficult issue to advance because it was a zero-sum game. There was only natural water. Transferring more of the natural water to the Palestinian side meant less water for the Israeli side. And that meant that water was put aside under the Oslo Accords, under the agreement of the two countries, or of the two parties, to be bargained, to be struck as a bargain, where the other difficult issues, Jerusalem, refugees, settlements, etc., would be dealt with as a package together with water. But 27 years later, the current allocation of natural water, which is completely to the disadvantage of the Palestinian side, cannot continue. And also the rationale for why water was held back as a final status issue is no longer relevant. And that's much due to Israel's leadership in the water sector, which means that today, there's no reason why Palestinians shouldn't be able to access greater quantities of water from the mountain aquifer. It means that Israel has to reduce its pumping from the aquifer, but that can be replaced at very competitive prices from the desalination plants that Israel has built on its coast. So
I'm just giving you a time check.
Good. So this is a low-hanging fruit. What we see here are three low-hanging fruits that the climate crisis requires that we move forward on. Otherwise, we're not only going to see instability in neighboring states, but these issues will hit hard back in Israel as well. Finally, we would stop seeing these scenarios of intermittent water supply throughout the West Bank and Gaza, and sewerage, which is free-flowing today, largely on cross-border streams from the West Bank, either to the Jordan River system or to Israel. So let me leave it there, and I'm happy to take on questions later. Thank you, Gabriela.
Thank you, Gidon. Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand over to Tareq. And Tareq, I will also give you a 10-minute time reminder.
Okay. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Screen. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you this evening. My name is Tareq Abu Hamed. I'm the Executive Director of the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies. I'm one of a few Palestinians who are heading Israeli academic institutions. I'm very glad that the Minister Zandberg used our motto by saying nature knows no borders. And actually, this is what the Arava Institute is doing. Our mission at the Institute is to advance cross-border environmental cooperation in the face of the political conflict. Our strategic vision is to advance cross-border climate justice and resilience in conflict zones regionally and globally. We do that to protect the shared environmental resources of our region from further degradation and loss. We want to be sure that environmental resources will be no longer a source of conflict, and environmental cooperation will be a model for other regions around the world. In this photo here, you see a sandstorm that covered the whole Eastern Mediterranean. This happened in 2015. This just gives an example how small the region that we live in, how fragile the region that we live in into for environmental issues. The same week, these photos, the upper left corner, this is Jerusalem, Jaffa Street, Baghdad, Baalbek in Lebanon. It's the same week during the sandstorm. We believe that nature knows no borders, and we do environmental cooperation because we share, as the minister said, we share the air, we share the water resources, and this is also, you saw it in Gidon's slide, that we share the same aquifer. The coastal aquifer is shared between Israel and Gaza. The mountain aquifer is shared between the West Bank and Israel, and the desert aquifer in the Arava is shared between Israel and Jordan. And our region transboundary rivers actually provide about 60% of our fresh water. It's the highest rate of dependence in international basin according to the World Bank. At the Arava Institute, we have an academic program and also 5 research centers. We have the Center for Transboundary Water Management. We have the Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Conservation. We have the Center for Sustainable Agriculture. We have the Jordan-Israel Center for Community Environment and Research. And we have the Center for Arid Social Ecology. Most of the research that we do at the Arava Institute is joint research with our partners in Jordan, with our partners in Palestine, in Morocco, in the United Arab Emirates. We do fully equal partnership. When I say research, it covers the whole umbrella of research, from the basic research, applied research, and also community work. Besides our research centers, as I said, we have an academic program. 1/3 of our students are Arab students, Palestinians, Jordanians, Israeli Arabs, sometimes students from Morocco. 1/3 is the Jewish students and 1/3 international students. They have a full academic program. They come to the Arava Institute for 1 semester or 2. They live in Kibbutz Ktura, and they have a full semester experience together. They share the same classroom, the same dining room, and the same dormitory. And they live 24/7 for 3 or 4 months together at the Arava Institute. And this is the way we build trust. Our region doesn't lack water. We have the technology to desalinate water. Our region doesn't lack energy resources. We have plenty of sun in our region to provide us with all the energy that we need from the sun and from renewable energy sources. What lacks in this region is the trust. And this is actually the foundation of the Arava Institute, that we build trust. After we build trust, we do joint projects on the ground. The water in Gaza, as Gidon also mentioned, 97% of the groundwater in Gaza is polluted. It's unfit for human consumption. What did the Arava Institute do? With our partners in the Gaza Strip, we introduced into Gaza an Israeli technology called WaterGen that generates water from the atmosphere. During the last war with Gaza in May, we've been in touch with our Gazan partners asking, send us please photos or check the systems, how are they functioning? And they said we cannot reach them because of the war, because roads are blocked. On Saturday morning, the morning that the war finished, we received photos of people standing in line filling water, because these systems were the only systems generating water for the community. And that was great exposure for this technology. On Monday, 3 days after the war, we received 5 different requests from 5 different municipalities in Gaza asking for such systems. This looks like a technical, but to be in touch with a Gazan partner during a war between Gaza and Israel, this shows how much we were able to build trust with our partners. These are photos from the systems that are inside the Gaza Strip. Another project that we are conducting right now is a 5 megawatt solar field to produce electricity and to cover the electricity shortage in Gaza. Wastewater, it's a major problem in Gaza. Lack of electricity doesn't allow Gazans to treat their wastewater. The wastewater infiltrates into the shared aquifer, or they just dump it into the Mediterranean. And in Ashkelon, which is like a few kilometers north into Gaza Strip, where they desalinate hundreds of million cubic meters of seawater, had to close a few times last year because of the organic pollution that arrives from the Gaza Strip. So we managed, with full coordination with our partners in Gaza and with full coordination with the civil administration in Israel, to introduce into Gaza off-grid wastewater treatment system that runs on solar energy. It treats 100 cubic meters a day for a certain neighborhood in Gaza to treat the wastewater and to reuse it for agricultural purposes. We established a group of women that they will use the treated wastewater to grow feed for animals, to generate income and jobs for the people in Gaza. And these are photos from inside Gaza Strip. Another project, it's a trunk line that connects the wastewater treatment plant in Al-Bire near Ramallah to the farmers in Jericho. Al-Bire wastewater treatment treats the wastewater, and the treated wastewater, it's dumped into the wadis, into the valley, and it's mixed with untreated wastewater, and it infiltrates into the mountain aquifer, pollutes the springs, and pollute the Wadi al-Kilt tourist site. So the Arava Institute managed to bring the Palestinian side and the Israeli side on the table, and also in a field trip, and we decided together in a certain route for the pipeline that will take the treated wastewater from Ramallah Al-Bire into the farmers in Jericho to be used for agricultural purposes. Another project that we conduct is jointly with Oxford University to explore scientific and technical feasibility of transboundary resources management in water and energy. We catalyze the trust, the ownership, the positive change on the ground and in the political arena that we live in today. Solar panels in Gaza. Gaza, as I said, suffer from electricity, and there's a huge increase in the number of solar systems in Gaza. They are off-grid systems, and they use a lot of lead-acid batteries, low quality. Annually, there is between 80 to 100,000 batteries disposed in Gaza. They pollute the aquifer. The lead is very cancerogen, and it's a major problem. In coordination with the Ministry of Environment and also the authorities in Palestine, we managed to agree to collect these batteries and send them into Israel for proper treatment. Another project, off-grid wastewater treatment plant for the villages in the West Bank, totally off-grid, that treats the water without any sludge, and the water will be reused for agriculture. Currently, we have projects in the Jordan Valley, and we have projects in the northern West Bank, and one in the Negev for the Bedouin communities. We do also research on the wastewater to collect samples to check the COVID-19. And we got very impressive results where they show actually the increase in the COVID-19 in the sewage before actually the health authorities see it by doing the COVID tests. Another project is desalination, solar desalination for the brackish water in the Jordan Valley to help the farmers to produce high quality water to diversify the agricultural products that they produce in the valley. And I would like to end with a very important slide that Gidon showed in the agreements between countries, the Oslo Agreement, the Joint Water Committee. These agreements did not function because they were not based on trust. And at the Arava Institute, by doing small-scale projects on the ground, we build trust with communities, we build trust with people. And on this foundation, we do our work. We use environment, as Minister Zandberg said, we use environment as a bridge to connect between people. We use environmental diplomacy by negotiating very low, below the radar, conducting projects and changing lives of people in our region to the better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tareq. I'll just let you end your screen sharing. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Lynn. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gabriella, and thanks to everybody for joining. I'm not sure if everybody knows what my role is. I work with the United Nations. I'm the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator for Palestine and the Deputy Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process. So again, thanks to everybody for joining and for the interest, and really good to hear about all the initiatives from Gidon and Tareq. So I will sort of start at a global level and then I will zoom in. Both Tareq and Gidon covered a lot, and also the minister, of course, about the current state of affairs in this region. So I won't repeat those. But from a global perspective, in his address to the Security Council last September, the Secretary General noted that the effects of climate change are particularly profound when they overlap with fragility and conflict. And I think everyone around the screen here knows that already. And it's clear that climate change and environmental mismanagement are risk multipliers in terms of conflict. 32 years ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, we call it the IPCC, noted that the greatest single impact of climate change could be on human migration, which of course is one of the main drivers of conflict. With millions of people displaced by shoreline erosion, coastal flooding, and agricultural disruption. Various analysts have tried to put a number on that, and they sort of come together around a repeated prediction that 200 million conflict migrants or climate refugees will exist by 2050. So that's 200 million climate refugees by 2050. In that same report, and just remember that was 32 years ago, the IPCC highlighted the forced migration hinders development in at least 4 ways, among them the increasing risk of conflict. And that, of course, is in addition to increased pressure on urban infrastructure and services, undermining economic growth, and leading to worse health, education, and social indicators among the migrants themselves, if not amongst the general population. The most recent IPCC report, 32 years later, describes the situation as code red for humanity, highlighting that the evidence of human-induced climate change through greenhouse gas emissions are already choking our planet. While acknowledging the threat of climate change to the life and livelihoods and millions of people across the world is real, the Secretary General noticed that it is not too late to act. The UN is committed to take on 3 challenges posed by climate change. A global commitment by all countries to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius and a 45% reduction in global emissions by 2030. To dedicate at least 50% of global climate financing to adaptation and resilience of already affected communities whose lives and livelihoods are at risk. And lastly, to make sure that climate adaptation and climate action and peace building reinforce each other. For example, by leveraging water for peace initiatives, and we've already heard that around the screen, and drawing on lessons from the past. We can look to other examples, Euphrates and Tigris, critical water resources for Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. Progress is made during times of calm, and there's regression during times of instability. The same goes for Delta Nile. It hosts more than 1/3 of the Egyptian population, and ensuring cooperation between Egypt and Ethiopia is going to be very important to avoid a reduction in the flow of water, and cooperation will be critical to avoid tension and a conflict. As the link between climate change and peace and security is becoming more and more apparent around the globe, member states of the UN are debating these issues more than ever before at the level of the Security Council. Ireland and Niger put forward a new Security Council resolution on links between climate change and peace and security last year. The Council did not adopt this thematic resolution on climate and security, but the resolution was supported by 132. The resolution was supported by 12 Council members, and it was co-sponsored by 113 member states. This is the second highest number of co-sponsors for one UN resolution in history. So we didn't quite make it there, but we're on the right track. I also know that my fellow panelist Gidon from EcoPeace has appeared in front of the Security Council twice in the last few years. And this is encouraging, and I hope more of these voices are able to be heard in these sorts of forums. Turning to the Middle East. We've already covered a lot of the information about what the status is here. I just wanted to highlight that, for example, the World Bank has declared what we call MENA, the Middle East and North African region, as being the most vulnerable place on Earth, with rising sea levels and large populations living near and depending on seas and rivers. The bank estimates by 2025, 80 to 100 million people in the MENA region will be exposed to water stress. The minister referred to Glasgow 26, and then of course the upcoming opportunities in 27 and in 28, both in the region, and that isn't by any coincidence. We need to take advantage of both of those opportunities to curb greenhouse gas emissions and provide necessary financing, which is critical to sustain livelihoods and avoid climate-related conflict in the Middle East. Now coming over to Israel and Palestine and the role of the United Nations. We've already talked about Minister Zandberg and her efforts to work with the Palestinians, which is a very, very welcome step, and of course, the Middle East Green-Blue Deal. Specifically on the UN role in Israel and Palestine. We have 23 UN agencies here who are providing both development and humanitarian support to vulnerable communities in the areas of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza. It was interesting to note, I think it was Tareq who mentioned the work being done during May and immediately after May. I was down in Gaza on the 21st on that Saturday, and I met with some of the Palestinians working for the Coastal Management Water Unit. And they were out during the war fixing the pipelines that had been damaged so the lagoons wouldn't overflow with raw sewage. And of course, I think we know that the raw sewage is a very, very large health hazard, never mind the environmental damage that occurs. And it was just really striking to me that these guys were out there fixing the pipes, which I think really shows the critical status of the water and sanitation mechanisms in Gaza. We did hear a lot of great initiatives from Gidon and Tareq. To add to that, as I said, there's 23 UN agencies that don't all work on environmental issues, but we have the United Nations Environmental Program, the Development Program, the Food and Agricultural Organization, UNICEF, which works on education, but it also has the mandate to work on water and sanitation and health. And then also, of course, the World Food Program. And they all have ongoing initiatives and programs to support adaptation and resilience. So for example, improved food security and food systems through support from the Food and Agricultural Organization and WFP. They're working to strengthen food systems so that communities can become more resilient and adapt to change in the climate. Again, when I was down there and I was at a greenhouse, you know, they have different types of seeds which can adapt to the climate change. And these types of projects are all funded by donors as well. And they are introducing new efficient irrigation systems and different production techniques so the agricultural sector in both the West Bank and Gaza can become more productive. The development program has done much to improve treatment of wastewater in Gaza. It has recently completed a $58 million wastewater treatment plant, lots of solar panels, which is really absolutely necessary in a place that has so much sun. That was a project that was funded by Japan and the Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development through the Islamic Development Bank. This plant has a flow capacity of 26,000 cubic meters to serve 360,000 residents in Khan Yunis. So it's not just going to protect health and environment of the residents or preserve limited water resources in Gaza, or provide non-conventional water sources that they can use to for agricultural purposes ultimately, but of course reducing the amount of wastewater that goes into the Mediterranean is obviously beneficial to all of us, and in particular Israel. The development project is also starting a project with funds from Belgium to protect Gaza's coastal line. The main road is about to fall into the sea, the main road along the sea. So UNDP is working on that, and they're actually taking some of the rubble from May to shore up the that coastal road so it doesn't disappear into the sea. And they're also working on addressing pollution of Wadi Gaza. You've heard about the lack of access to drinking water. UNICEF has built a small-scale desalination capacity in Gaza with the help of the European Union. And then, of course, the United Nations Environment Program is providing support. For those of you who are interested, you can Google the State of the Environment report, and it has a lot of recommendations. A lot of them are for Palestine, but a lot of them are for Israel as well. And I saw a question earlier on about some policies and legislations, et cetera. There's a very long list of recommendations in there that can be undertaken. So finally, I just wanted to mention that in addition to my roles as UN Humanitarian and Resident Coordinator, I do work with the Special Coordinator Tor Venezuelan on the Middle East peace process. And again, as we've heard already today, we are working to try and get back to negotiations and hopefully to peace. And of course, part of this mandate is about bridging gaps, bringing parties closer together. And again, as many of us have already said, that common solutions to the common challenges faced by Israelis and Palestinians can build trust and closer cooperation. I'm hoping that we'll be able to build on support and efforts that we're seeing here today. And really that this is just the beginning of a discussion with groups like yours to try and proceed, as I think all of us know we really have to do very, very urgently to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And lastly, I'll hand over to Mohammad. Thank you very much for all of your time.
Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you, J-Link. And it's really wonderful to be in this wonderful company of my co-panelists. My name is Mohammad, and I'm calling, unlike my co-panelists here, I'm calling from the other side of the world. I'm in Canada, in Peterborough. So I would like to acknowledge that I'm talking here from the traditional territory of the Mississauga, Anishinaabe indigenous people, and I'm really thankful for their care for the land and for allowing me to be here as an uninvited settler. So thank you very much again for allowing me to speak here. I don't want to repeat a lot of the wonderful things that my co-panelists have stressed. You know, the projects that they're talking about hopefully have a lot of promise, but what I would like to talk about a little bit is the importance of capacity building towards this end, and also really data collection that we absolutely need in order to measure progress on these ends. So I want to share with you a few things that I have found out, you know, just preparing for this talk. that really sort of surprising and startling in so many ways. And I just want to make sure that you guys can see my screen, right? So what I'm sharing here is the website of the International Energy Agency, a Paris-based group that aggregates data on energy around the world. So for example, if you want to look at the energy nexus of Jordan, it's really easily, you can get it. You can go here, type Jordan and get it, right? If you want to get Israel's, also easy. You can do that and you'll get it easily. But if you want to get Palestine, well, Palestine does not exist. All right, and I don't want to get political here. Let's look at the West Bank. West Bank does not exist. Do you want to get at Gaza? Gaza does not exist. Now, my suspicion is that Palestine data is included in Israel's, but without disaggregating this data, without it being readily available, it will be very hard to see what the Palestinian needs are and how do we meet them. So as we have academic institutions here, such as the Arava Institute, with which I was a student many years back, and there I co-authored a paper with Dr. Tareq Abu Hamed assessing the very topic we're trying to talk about here today, and that is the potential for renewable energy generation in Palestine. We were facing with the very same issue. Finding reliable data was hard back then in 2011, as it is unfortunately today. We are, there's no kind of place to find data easily about this. And I also want to stress here that this is not only the I just want to make sure I switch to a PDF. Do you see that, or are you still seeing my website?
I'm still seeing your website, Mohammed.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing and then share again because I would like to show you this too. So this is the country profile from the World Bank's Global Solar Atlas that shows the photovoltaic potential. This is basically the measure of how much we can get, how much energy, how much watt per hour we can get out of each watt hour, solar installed. So what is, if you're installing, like say, 5 megawatt field, how much energy per hour can you get on a daily basis? And you can see here as well that data for Israel, which now the World Bank has excluded the West Bank, as we can see here, and Gaza, is very much available. You can see that all the data that you want, basically PV installed per capita, Human Development Index, all there. Now, if you look at the West Bank, you see a lot of not available. And if you go down here, a lot of not available. PV installed capacity, not available. I downloaded this last night. So this is the most recent data from the Solar Atlas project of the World Bank. You see a lot of not available. And that, I think, is a really big challenge. We need reliable data. And I think as we have the United Nations, we have the Arava Institute and EcoPeace, and you guys work with a lot of these academic institutions, we need that data so that we kind of, hold people to account. Do we, are we getting to our commitments? Mr. Zandberg talked about Glasgow and getting to net zero. Getting to net zero is not going to be easy without the reliable data that we need. And on that note, I want to show you, I began here by showing the Israeli and the Jordanian energy mix. As you can see here, the solar, I probably will need to, sorry about this. I need to switch back to the website now. Here it is. And as you can see here, the amount of solar energy generated in Israel in 2020 did not exceed, basically, it's only hovered around 4 terawatt hour. And that is, by the way, around 6% of Israel total energy generation. And as we can see here, it's mostly about 62% still natural gas. Oil is still, coal is still about 30% of that. And so the road to net zero in about 8 years, or at least getting to halving our CO2 emissions by 2030 is really like a long road ahead. And if, as Mr. Bromberg talked about, Jordan being a major producer for the region, if you look at Jordan's even much less. So currently Israel produces twice the amount of electricity from solar as does Jordan. Jordan's in 2020 was about 2 terawatt hour. And so basically that's just really abysmal compared to what the region could potentially get to if it really puts its act together. And I want to stress here, from going from data to capacity building, as somebody who is in education, I'm currently doing my master's degree in Canada, looking at sustainable development goals, the SDGs, indicators in the town that the city is based in, Peterborough. And data is really crucial, but also building the capacity to get there. And I know that Mr. Bromberg just mentioned about how the Palestinians are included in the development of these plans, but I really think that the technical capacity, the capacity to design solar panels, the capacity to maintain solar panels, the capacity to basically educate as well people on the ground is really needed in order for people to feel ownership of these systems. And I think ownership is really key, that these systems are co-designed, co-used, and co-maintained, not Jordan and Israel designing them and the Palestinians are only consumers. In a previous hat I wore, I was a research fellow at King's College in London, where I looked at the social impact of community-based solar energy projects in the West Bank, the small-scale, very tiny microgrid. We're talking about even kilowatt level, not even megawatt level, in some of the West Bank villages. And a lot of it was, how much ownership do these Palestinians feel of the systems in place? Are they just developed by Israeli who are well-intentioned, who want to see things change without necessarily developing that capacity? Or are we seeing that capacity being developed, the education that is needed? So I really want to stress here that that needs to happen. And I would like to propose that the Arava Institute potentially could start to host programs that may be 4 months long, whereby Palestinians and Israelis and Jordanians could just focus on the technicalities. I'm a graduate of the Arava Institute, and the program is wonderful, but I think that kind of building that technical capacity of design and development would be really, really absolutely necessary. And the last thing is, I think the political context that I want to mention here is really important. Mr. Bromberg talked about maybe getting Israeli permits to develop solar energy fields in Area C. I think that would be wonderful to see. I think there are probably a lot of political impediments to that. The Israeli public is not on board with territorial concessions to the Palestinians, and I think there needs to be kind of a political engineering of a lot of these initiatives, just as much as technical engineering. I want to borrow from a renowned Israeli behavioral economist, Daniel Kahneman, when he talks about noise being how the variations in people's judgment of a particular issue. And we have seen noise in the Israeli public and how it sees its relationship to the Palestinian conflict really diminish. There's a crystallization of Israeli public opinion that has been time and again, especially in the last decade, shown in public polling to show that the Israeli public is not willing to give territorial concessions of any kind. So I think that in working towards these plans, this really needs to be in mind, and how it's promoted to the Israeli public in ways that is palatable to its own stomach at this day and age. And I think that that's really, I hope that we're not only drawing kind of plans on paper that don't see reality. And the last thing, and I'm sorry if I took longer time, I want to mention is, I think that considering microgrids, I mentioned the example of a kilowatt hour microgrid, but maybe slightly larger in the kind of lower 10 megawatt level in some of these towns, and giving ownership, community level, decentralized renewable energy grids could be a really good workable solution as well in some of the areas in the West Bank and Gaza. And so thank you for allowing me to be here. And I really hope that I was able to stress out these points that I think are really crucial if we want to get to having our CO2 emissions by 2030 and hopefully getting to a net zero by 2050. I think the road ahead is very long, given the current energy mix that we have in the region. If Jordan wants to become like the energy provider, it needs to step up. I mean, at 2 terawatt hour in 2020, that's an abysmal rate compared to its own consumption or Israel's or the West Bank. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing these plans materialize and seeing more of robust cooperation happen in our region.
Thank you very much, Mohammad. If you would just end your screen sharing.
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you. We're going to move now to questions and answers. I just want to remind our participants that at the bottom of your screen, if you click on the Q&A button, you'll be able to submit a question. We have some really wonderful questions, and I'll start with one from Jose Hamra, who asks, how can we focus on environmental peace building without shrinking the conflict and hindering a political process that meets the needs of Palestinian and Israeli rights? And maybe, Lynn, we can start with you with that question.
Sure. I mean, I think this question goes far beyond the environmental initiatives. I think it goes beyond all the initiatives that are going on, be they bilateral or in cooperation with the Israelis and the Palestinians together. And, you know, I don't have, the answer for me is pretty simple. There has to be a peace process in parallel with all of these various initiatives. One can't be seen as replacing the other. And step by step to make the conditions Palestinians live better is not a substitute for an ultimate solution. So we can't allow that sort of reasoning just to take hold.
Thank you, Lynn. Would anyone else like to get on? Thank you.
So it's a very important question. And I think that sadly, there is no sense of urgency at the moment in the peace process. There is an urgency, or there's a strong sense of urgency on the climate crisis. And if we can use the climate crisis as a means to advance peace building between Israelis and Palestinians, then we're creating a new and out-of-the-box entry point. Now, solving Palestinian water rights is a concrete peace process issue. That is one of the 5 final status issues. And by advancing those water rights under a climate resilient scenario, we're able to build trust. We're able to show to both sides that there is a partner, that one of the final status issues of the peace process can be solved. And we believe that sort of takes the rug under the feet of those spoilers and deniers that come and say that there'll never be peace, that there isn't a partner to speak to on the other side. So although environmental peace building is certainly not instead of a negotiated settlement of all issues, it can contribute strongly to one of the critical issues of the peace process, and that is water. And through water, build trust and show that there is a partner to work on the other final status issues. And given stalemate, given the horrible lack of a sense of urgency to move forward on broader peace process issues, this is an opportunity that we can't afford to miss.
Thank you, Gidon. Mohammad and Tareq, would you like to comment or?
Dr. Tareq, if you want to go ahead, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mohammad. Actually, when you live under occupation, when you struggle to find 20 shekels, to work for 20 shekels a day to provide your family with food, environment becomes a luxury for many Palestinians. This is not a reason not to cooperate on environmental issues. It's urgent issue for everyone who lives in the region. And as I said, we build a trust with people. We use environmental projects solving water problems, food production, energy problems to build a trust and peace in the region. We are not shrinking the conflict into environmental conflict. No, not at all. At the Arava Institute, we have a peace building seminar where students share their family stories, share where they come from. They talk about the Independence Day. They talk about Nakba. They talk about settlements. They talk about the refugee camps. They are exposed to each other. They live with each other. And that's the way to build a trust in the region that we live in. We have more than 500 Palestinian alumni in the West Bank. They are ambassadors of environment, ambassadors of peace in the region.
Thank you, Tareq. Mohammad, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to echo what Gidon said about how maybe, and this is really repeatedly seen as well again in public opinion polling of the Israeli public, the peace is not important at this point. And I think maybe promoting this as a fighting climate change, again, like if you're building a megawatt level field in Area C, maybe saying this is not a territorial concession. The Israeli army will still control this territory, but we're using this to reduce pressure on the Israeli electricity grid by allowing more proliferation of renewable energy. I think the message needs to be crafted in order not to backlash. I mean, we've seen time again that if the Israeli public is not on board, it's not going to happen. Let's really face it. And I think that that's important, is how do you speak to the Israeli public, I think is really key at this point.
Thank you very much. We have a number of questions related to the issue of youth with regards to peace building and climate response. So I'm going to aggregate them to the best of my abilities. Really, the question is, we're all very aware that both Israeli and Palestinian societies are commonly referred to as young societies because of their demographic distribution. To what extent do young people need to be involved in these conversations and initiatives? And to what extent are your organizations or research topics engaging with young people in the MENA region, but more specifically in Israel-Palestine? Tareq, would you like to begin? Yes, please.
Okay, actually, this is exactly what the Arava Institute is doing. We have around like 50 to 60 students every semester between the age of 19 to 27 from Palestine, Israel, Jordan, international students. They all involved with the environmental issues in the region. Through the academic program, we would touch upon also politics and environment, political ecology, water. And when you talk about water in the Middle East, water means politics, as Gidon said. So they are involved. And besides that, also to answer Mohammed's question, we also have capacity building programs. We have training programs for engineers in the region. Last month, we had a group from Gaza, engineers and technicians, to be trained on solar energy and the off-grid technologies. So the youth is involved, and it's not only actually the students are our main product. We have an alumni network that we continue working with our alumni. We have joint initiatives for them. We have alumni coordinators in the whole region, in Israel, Palestine, and Jordan, also in the US. So we mainly work with the young people here.
Thank you, Tareq. Gidon, please.
Yes, so it's a really important question, because the youth are the future, and what we've seen from around the world is true youth leadership. I mean, the Greta Thunbergs of the world, who have gone out there and highlighted that that my generation and my parents' generation have failed the planet. Well, at EcoPeace too, I didn't have time to go into our youth work. We work in schools across the region, high schools in Israel, in Palestine, and in Jordan, and have introduced climate and water diplomacy. But the Green-Blue Deal that we're calling for is calling for the mainstreaming of climate and water education across our education systems. And that doesn't take place at the moment. I mean, you might attend the programming of EcoPeace as a high school student, or of the Arava as a university student, but that's not enough. The Green-Blue Deal calls for the integration of climate education across our education systems, Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian. In our current work, we've already identified the Israeli Greta, the Palestinian Greta, the Jordanian Greta, and they've appeared on different international platforms and locally, expressing their concern for their future. That these issues are not issues of privilege. These issues, people need to understand. We have 3 or 4 months of rainfall in this part of the world every year. Water and the environment is not something of privilege. It's the very basis of our lives, and the climate crisis threatens to take that away. And the more we educate the young people of what that crisis means to our respective populations, the more we'll be able to create the political will to move forward on these issues. These are not issues of pleasure. These are issues of life and survival.
Thank you, Gidon. Would anyone else like to comment?
Please go ahead, Lynn. I'll go after you.
Okay, sure. Just to say that we have the United Nations Foundation for Population, and they actually focus heavily with youth. And we have a youth advisory board that we've just brought together where a number of young people applied to be on this board, and they'll actually be giving us recommendations. And we expect a lot of those to be focused on the environment. And of course, we have UNESCO and UNICEF and UNEP who work directly with younger people. But I think one of the most important things from our perspective is so many of our staff are actually quite young, and they're involved in all the various initiatives. And again, as I said, with respect to the first question, you know, this just isn't about the environment, although I know this panel is about the environment, but the youth have to be involved in everything across the board. You know, because it is such a young population in both Palestine and Israel, and certainly in Palestine, most of the leadership is very old, and the young people need to get involved and need to start moving into positions in order to, I think, change the agenda there. So, thanks.
Thank you. Mohammad, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think definitely what Tareq said about the Arava Institute is one of the examples whereby young people come together, learn together, and you know, develop friendships as well as sometimes professional relationships, and you know, conduct projects together. I think what we need, while I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Arava Institute, it's still a very small institute, and I think what we need is a multiplication of that effort. We need multiples of the Arava all around the Middle East and North Africa, and you know, to have really like the region being a place where people can travel easily, learn from one another, interact with one another, and really build that kind of connections that we think are necessary in order to get us to that you know, peace and stability and coexistence that we hope to see. And we've seen signs of from the world that maybe there is interest in there. The passing of the Nita-Louie Fund Act in Congress was quite a great step. There is some millions of dollars, 50 per year over 5 years, although I have to stress, so that people don't get their hopes up, a lot of that money is DFC, which is investment loans for basically for economic projects. But within that, there's still some millions dedicated to people interaction and hosting programs and getting more people together. We need that, because I think the problem is that, you know, if we don't have that face-to-face interaction, and the pandemic has definitely set us back on that front, you're going to have a lot of mistrust. There's mistrust that has been built over decades, and I think we need more strategic programs that really, again, are measurable and can lead to substantive change. But I also think that we shouldn't really be too critical. That's I think sometimes we're too critical of the outcome of these programs. We should probably try to measure them as much as we could, but they're still good on their own right. Getting people together and speaking at this point is good in and of itself. We need more from those programs, but also I think sometimes there's often criticism of, oh, what are these people doing? How is this changing things on the ground? Will this lead to any substantive change? I think generationally, I think these things take generation. We're not, I mean, I really, like, I don't think we're gonna get there in the next 10 years, but what we could get to is basically people getting to know each other on a deeper level, and hopefully having healthier levels of interaction as a result of proliferation of these programs. So, you know, Arava is great, but we need hundreds and maybe thousands of Arava.
Thank you very much to all four of you in your responses. I'm very aware that it's almost 25 past whatever time zone you're in at the moment, and we did say an hour and a half. So we're going to end off with one last question for the four of you, and if you'd like to end your respond with any sort of closing remarks about this evening or today's panel in general, please do. And the question is whether you have suggestions or recommendations to the organizations and individuals who are represented here today in terms of contributing positively to the climate response in the region. You know, how can we as progressive Jews around the world and others who have joined us today around the world in assisting and facilitating these processes that all of you have highlighted so brilliantly today? Who would like to begin? Sure, Gidon, please.
Ladies first, Lynn, go ahead.
Thanks, Gideon and Gabriella. You know, really from my perspective, I think at least Gideon said that it's about going back to the Israeli public and getting them to understand the urgency of working with the Palestinians on these issues. I don't think it's in the average Israeli psyche anymore. I worked with UNSCO, the same office that I work partially for now. I worked with them from 2003 to 2011. And when I was here then, there was much more of a dialogue. And I'm hearing everybody saying, you know, we need to work closer and build trust and face to face. But I have to say, the difference in 2021 compared to 2011 in terms of the interest from both sides in having those face-to-face contacts has really decreased. And yeah, I think it's, you know, goes back to part of this shrinking the conflict business. I haven't thought this through totally, but in my mind, there's a bit of a connection in terms of, you know, the whole normalization issue. And for Palestinians, they see normalization as, you know, part of the shrinking of the conflict. And there's been so many face-to-face initiatives that I think they, including the young people, they don't have a lot of faith in that anymore. So there has to be something that changes that perspective, both from the Palestinian side in terms of how they see working with Israelis, but also from the Israelis in terms of seeing at least the benefits for Israel in terms of working on these types of issues. So yeah, so I will, so sorry, the question was, what should everybody around the screen do? You know, and we have to be lobbying for a different approach with governments, your own governments. I'm Canadian, I've been to Peterborough. You know, all those people who are in Canada need to be speaking to the Canadian government and the American government and all of our governments and getting the message out more strongly that we are not on the right path. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Gidon, I'll go back to you now.
So building on what you just said, I think one of the changes that you know, the audience could help foster is changing the paradigm. Now, you know, I think all of us would have wanted to see all final status issues solved 27 years ago, or if not 27, 22 years ago. They were supposed to be solved within 5 years. For 27 years, the governments of Israel and Palestine have come and said to their public that either everything is solved, all the final status issues, Jerusalem, settlements, refugees, security and water, or nothing is solved. And therefore, I would come and argue it's no surprise that the public on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side have no faith that there's ever going to be peace, because the paradigm that we've created has left us with nothing. An all or nothing paradigm of solving all final status issues together, as much as, of course, I think all of us would want to have achieved that, given that we haven't achieved it. And 27 years later, we're still going down that same path. It's no wonder that our public have no faith, because they've seen no improvement, because the paradigm has also not allowed an improvement. That's why the climate approach It's not the all or be all, but it's one approach that helps advance one of the 5 final status issues. And it would mean more water in every Palestinian home. It would mean less sewage on the Palestinian side of cross-border streams and on the Israeli side of cross-border streams. That's a powerful message to bring home to every Palestinian and every Jordanian. So first of all, my call would be for the audience, for the Jewish communities that I guess are involved here, is to call on the international community to break away from the all or nothing approach, because the international community has not tried to call on the government of Israel or the Palestinian Authority to move away from the all or nothing approach. Secondly, I think another important consideration is the way that the climate effort is dealt with under the United Nations. The requirement is of each country to submit a national progress report. But the climate crisis doesn't hit each country individually. It hits a region in a particular way. As I think Lynn said and others said, the Eastern Mediterranean, the Middle East, is a climate hotspot. It hits the Middle East differently. The climate crisis hits the Middle East differently than it does other parts of the world. So if the United Nations climate convention to fight climate change would change its requirement to in addition to national reports, to bring out regional reports as to how a particular region, how the Middle East is going to be impacted, and require at least put out an effort to require cooperative reports. That's exactly the way the Green Blue Deal is headed. That's exactly the way the European Union has showed the world how to lead in fighting the climate crisis. So I think our second call is for the UN Convention, Framework Convention to fight climate change, to broaden its requirement and to look to regional solutions for climate hotspots. And that would encourage programs or ideas like the Green Blue Deal to get further buy-in from our respective governments. And thank you.
Thank you, Gidon. Mohammad, could I pass to you?
Yeah, thank you. I think my point to the wonderful audience here is really what we need is democratized access to funding for people-to-people's initiative. I think I mentioned the Nita Lowey Fund is a good example, but I think if you're an American on the call, pressure USAID to reduce the bureaucracy involved in applying and getting funding, reduce the barrier of those who can access those funds, because we need proliferation of these activities. If it's only a handful of organizations that are getting funded, it's gonna still be small. And if you're Canadian, please call Minister Sajjan as well. He's the Minister of International Development in Canada, and tell him that we need something like the Nita Lowey Fund in Canada to support people-to-people work. I have been trying to start a Canadian Israeli-Palestinian exchange centered on sustainability, and getting access to people who would support this has proven to be really, really difficult. I think we need to reduce that barrier. We need to allow young people to organize their own initiatives and get those funded in order to get to that level. I think the time has definitely come for this. So please, if you have, email your members of Congress, email your parliamentarians, all of this, tell them that we need more democratized funding for people-to-people initiatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammad. Wonderful. And lastly, Tareq.
Okay, in a few seconds, I totally support what Mohammad said. We need people-to-people. Israel has a peace treaty with Egypt. Is there peace between people in Israel and Egypt? No. The same thing also in Jordan. The same thing also in Palestine. The only growing thing in the Middle East is the mistrust, is the disconnection, and projects on the ground, bringing people together. Bottom-up approaches is the the only way to connect between people, because peace is not on paper. Peace is between people, and it's what we are trying to do here at the Arava Institute, using the environment as bridge. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. I have a few announcements before we end off. This webinar will be available to all 300 plus people who RSVP'd. And if you would like to access the webinar, or you'd like to share the webinar please do share that link. You can also find the recordings for this webinar and previous webinars on our website, jlinknetwork.org, jlinknetwork.org. And most importantly, I'd like to thank the 4 panelists here with us tonight and Minister Zandberg, who I believe is gone. But thank you to all of you for being here and for addressing us tonight. Has been a truly remarkable experience for everyone involved. We have lots of thanks in the chat. If you would like all 4 of you to send contact details or further information about organizations and research that you do, please do share it to the chat now. I see that Lynn and Gidon, you already have done so, and thank you for that. And we hope you have a good day, morning, evening, further, wherever you're calling from, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.